Modern requirements analysis techniques for your Agile implementation. So before starting, a big thank you to our sponsors who allowed us actually to present during the Scottish Summit 2021. So big thank you to Scriptrunner, DK Global, Proximetry, Redspire, Agilicis, and Hitachi Solutions. Thank you guys for allowing us to share knowledge in the Scottish Summit. Hi, my name is Dani Kahil. I'm a solution specialist and Microsoft MVP. I live in Australia and I are really passionate and specialize in mastering requirements and solution envisioning for Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform, right? So I really thought, look, I prepared a bit of an agenda for you for me to share with you my knowledge through the years, that I kind of focused really on the area of requirements and envisioning, right? And I will start by sharing with you a story, a personal experience that kind of shaped my passion for those topics, right? So I effectively share with you an experience where I failed in the past because of a lack of understanding of requirement. Then I'll cover a bit more what I mean when talking analysis in Agile. Where does the analysis fit, the analysis of requirements fit within an Agile project? And I'll finish by really sharing with you some techniques to, to empathize with your users that are part of this analysis. I will share also some techniques where that you can use to define and challenge some of the assumptions for your requirements. And again, I will give you some examples. And then I'll cover a topic about how I use stories when discussing requirements with my clients. How do I use stories that relate to a client to make them kind of better understand the requirements and better understand what I mean when kind of demoing a solution to them to validate requirements. Avoid project failure with a shared understanding of requirements and a shared vision. So to better explain what I mean with avoiding project failure with a shared understanding of requirements and a shared vision, let me share with you a story, right? A story of what not having a shared understanding of requirements and a shared vision mean. And it's an experience that caused me a lot of stress and a lot of misery in the past. So effectively, it was an experience that I had a couple of years ago. I was running a discovery engagement, a discovery project to scope a future CRM implementation, right? So I was working on that discovery engagement with another architect. It was about a month's time engagement. I was working then my customer was a large bank in Belgium. And as part of that discovery, we run a few workshops, using the standard BA techniques, you capturing requirements on spreadsheets and using business process flow and demoing dynamics and kind of mapping and drafting the requirements. The outcome effectively of that discovery is, so what we needed to produce at the end was the scope, a high-level design document, the cost of the implementation, and a roadmap, effectively, of how we're going to implement that system. And effectively during that engagement, we felt like everything was going well, right? Workshop were going fine, stakeholders were engaged, and so forth. And then comes the final presentation, and I remember very particularly that day. It was still in Belgium a couple of years ago in January, so pretty cold outside, winter, but beautiful sunny day. And effectively, I remember entering this huge boardroom, incredible, biggest I've ever seen. A couple of stakeholders were already there, so I kind of started chatting with them because some of them I met during the workshops. And then the room kind of slowly filled in with 30, 40 people, right? Amazing how many people were present at that final presentation of that discovery. And then the IT business up leader, the person to whom I was reporting, kind of started the presentation, reminded everyone of the purpose of that discovery and so forth, and then invited me to, to come and present. And then I started my presentation. I remember I started with, if I recall, I started with customer service. Then I covered, marketing, presenting the scope and how we intend to implement that for them. And, people are nodding and yeah, kind of following what I'm saying. And then when I start discussing about the sales requirements, this is where my presentation turned effectively into a total mess. So I'm starting to discuss the scope for the sales, and midway through, the sales lead, that was a lady, kind of cut me through it halfway and kind of very aggressively says, start questioning why some of her key requirements are not even listed, right? So I tried to kind of explain, big room, everyone kind of looking at me, and then I tried to kind of explain and defend and argument a bit how and what we discussed during the workshop. But again, she cut me through and then say that she doesn't agree and that she is not signing in that discovery, and then, she doesn't agree with that. So yeah, I felt like, the atmosphere of the room went freezing cold. I looked at my solution architect to kind of, try to save me here or something. He was looking down, stressed as well. So, I just, apologized. And I effectively said, I propose, okay, there's obviously a misunderstanding here. I propose maybe we redo, 1 or 2 workshops to kind of, agree and come to a compromise. And then, I continue. I don't even remember how that presentation went to the end, but I effectively recall that we needed to do some additional workshops, and that put a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on my architect and myself, right? And this bad experience really haunted me for years, right? I couldn't really understand what went wrong on an implementation, right? And it really pushed me to try to find answers on why some projects are failing and others not, and try to avoid effectively those kind of situations in the future, right? And then it really led me to understand that, there are many reasons for a project to fail, but one of the key reasons for projects that are failing is not having a shared understanding of requirements and then a shared vision for the system, right? It's key for me, no doubt about this. And I made my goal to effectively help individuals like yourself implementing Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform to get as quickly as possible to a shared understanding of requirements and vision, effectively to reduce miscommunication, rework, and avoid burnout due to stress down the track. Analysis in Agile. So really, if you look at a typical Agile project, effectively there are 2 stages of an Agile project I see, right? There is the project context that you can see at the very beginning. So this is even before the project starts, where we're going to identify the current challenges, the solutions and business benefits that the solutions will bring, and maybe that's even more than Dynamics. Maybe it's Dynamics, Power Platform, maybe it's even outside of the business application landscape, right? But it's important that we identify the solutions and the benefits that those solutions will bring. Then effectively, before starting the project, we want to know who are our key users using the system, what are the actions that they are supposed to perform, and who are the stakeholders. So that's really even before the project, right? And then when you go into, the project envisioning and a project delivery, where you have the product backlog with requirements, and then you start your iteration. So you start delivering your project through, iteration planning, analysis and design, build, test and deploy, and then iteration review, and then you go effectively deliver your project using these iterations. So effectively, when you look at the analysis and design
kind of part of that iteration, I often use, and it's inspired from design thinking, I often use a loop here to run through workshops or requirements gathering sessions or validation sessions where I spend time empathizing with my users. So one of the techniques I'll be presenting today is about shadowing users, and I'll give you some examples and stories. So, but it's not only about there is more techniques other than shadowing, right? You want to spend time understanding, reading the requirements. You want to have meetings with your stakeholders and users. You want to have workshops, right? So so this is about understanding the pains and the challenges of your users. Then you're going to spend time defining and ideating solutions. So defining requirements and ideating how can we solve the current challenges or the current requirements that your users have. And again, very specific techniques that I will share with you. So requirements validation sessions, some design thinking methods and techniques, like how might we, abstraction laddering are very useful. Again, ideating, kind of discussing possible solutions with your users is very important here. And then I also kind of spend time prototyping and testing the prototypes, right? So here, very simply, I won't spend that too much time on this part here in this presentation, but you should look at it as spin a sandbox environment of Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform, and then start prototyping in it and using it during your workshop, your meetings. Try to play in those environments to kind of mimic the requirements and test those with your user. Test that you understand what they mean. Test that you understand, that you understand the requirements and then their challenges, right? Again, a verbal prototyping is very powerful because it's again visual, so you can kind of validate ideas with your stakeholders, right? So this is where effectively analysis and design fit within an agile project. And again, I'll be going through some of the techniques in this presentation about so empathizing, defining, and ideating, and then I won't have anything specific about prototype and testing. But as I said, right, this is effectively for you to spin an instant and start playing in a sandbox environment to validate ideas. So as I said, empathize with your users. So previously what we discussed, right? So I'll cover effectively this part here. So one of the techniques I use to empathize with my users is shadowing session, right? So, and I'll give you a bit more theory about shadowing sessions a bit later, but in the meantime, let me explain you an example, right? That's something that happened to me a few months ago, because I thought it was a good example to actually share with you here. So effectively it was the beginning of a project, and we identified some key roles, right, to go and kind of try to understand the current challenges of those key roles. So a few months ago, as I said, it was for a field service implementation here in Australia. So I effectively go on site with a field technician. As you can see on the picture, the technician kind of took me on site. He was assigned a work to fix this machine. So effectively, I went to the office first, had a chat with him, then he took me on site to go and work with him to fix this machine. So the first thing he kind of took some equipment from the office, and then we went to fix that machine, right? So we arrive, he opened the boot of his truck, and he connects his laptop, as you can see here, and then so his laptop connected to the boot, and then he effectively had a printed paper, kind of a work order printed here. So he effectively had to deliver that work order and start kind of his work, right? So start his machine, and then effectively explains me, look, Danny, I start my machine, And then I follow the instruction on that paper, and then I start my application. So they use some kind of web-based application to fill the jobs that they were doing on site. So effectively open the laptop, open Outlook, and then retrieve from Outlook a PDF in there, right? So he had a PDF open from an email. He had that piece of paper here, and then on his laptop he opened that web-based application where he had to fill the details of his work order, right? And so that was on the paper. And then, as you can see, in that applications, he effectively had, I don't know, like 50 different fields, right, that he had to fill. So and he had to fill this application with information based on the paper. So on the paper, with the equipment that he was supposed to use, he took it from that printed document here. He also had some information in an email in a PDF that he got in an email, and he was basically retyping information from here and information that he got from an attachment of an email into that application. So he spent like half an hour at least retyping information from those two different different piece of information. And while he was retyping, he was explaining to me, yeah, you see, Dani, I mean, all those fields we kind of need to retype, and I'm actually, can you imagine if it's raining? Can you imagine if I don't have my because sometimes I don't have all my equipment with me, so I have to retype that sometimes when I go back to the office. And then I suddenly realized that, man, you spending 30 minutes just retyping information from one source to another, right, without any specific gains. And it's effectively, the problem was that those systems were completely disconnected, right? So the printed document was coming from one system, the email with the attachment was coming from another, and then he had to fill that web application, which was completely disconnected from the other system, right? So I told him, well, I think one of the first things we'll solve with Dynamics 365 and field surveys is definitely, putting all those different disparate systems into one as quickly as possible, so that when you arrive on site, you can effectively just validate some of those fields and maybe fill in some of the specific fields related to the location, and then that's it. You can effectively go and start working, right? So effectively, being on site with him kind of highlighted me the pain and the challenges that user had while on site, and really that was kind of a big red, kind of requirement that we had to solve for those users. So again, right, because I was there with him, I could understand and feel the pain, took some pictures, and then when we were then designing the system, making sure that all those disparate systems, all those disparate teams would use one unified process, so that we avoid as much as possible, retyping the information, right? So that's really one example of shadowing sessions. I did a few others. I thought I would share this one with you today. But effectively, shadowing session, as I said, it's very powerful for you to kind of understand and kind of feel the challenges of your users, right? So one important thing is, before the sessions, what you want to do is that you want to select the roles and the users you want to follow, right? Look, it takes time, right? Shadowing session takes time. so I spent half a day spending with that agent, and then half a day almost rewriting all the information and my observations. So it is not something you can do, especially on bigger projects, not something you can do for all the roles and all the users. You want to also map some key processes you want to follow, right? You want to follow the ones that are where there's a lot of interaction between different systems, the one where or processes that you don't really understand correctly, and you want to kind of just see by yourself how the user performs a specific task. Very important that during the session as well, you inform the user about the purpose of the session, right? So look, in my example, that was pretty obvious, but sometimes if you're asked to sit next to another user that was not maybe completely involved in the project, they might feel a bit uncomfortable. Explain the purpose, explain that you are there to see how they work, so that you can improve, come up with recommendation to improve their current way of using the software, or you coming effectively to help implement a new system, and then see the pains they have will help you deliver and help them on their day-to-day activities, right? Look, use any screen recording tools that you can. So if you are on site like me, take pictures or videos. If you are virtual, you can record your sessions so that you can get back to them, right? So that's quite important. And then after the session, again, share your notes with your user, and then share your recommendation with the teams, right? Don't forget to kind of summarize your note and then send everything for validation. I hope you enjoyed this technique. So this is one of the techniques I wanted to show and explain to you, because it's one that I found very valuable. Define and challenge assumptions. So if you look at defining and ideating, it comes somewhere in after you empathize with your user, right? So effectively, you want to make sure that you don't take for granted the requirements that are being assigned to you, right? So what I mean with that is that your client might come with a list of requirements, and those might be defined by one person and are not effectively the representation of the whole team, right? So one technique that I like using a lot is what I call the abstraction laddering. So effectively what we have is that we have an initial statement, so an initial requirement, and then during a sessions what we do is that together with some of the users, we're going to try to identify why is this requirement so important for them. So why is this requirement important, and then how can we solve it, right? And effectively, an example I had lately is a client wanted to implement a portal system, right? So but they really didn't know exactly how to articulate their specific requirements. So what we did is we spent time effectively identifying why is the portal to give their clients so important, right? And then going up, asking all the people, all the stakeholders, why is this requirement so important? We kind of mapped, the essence and the purpose of that requirement, and then the how. It's kind of going more into specific on but how you're going to implement that, right? And sometimes you see that to implement and make a requirement work, it's not only about dynamics. It can be a change in the team, it can be a change in the business processes. So in this case, for example, of the portal, we identified, yes, we have to enable Dynamics 365 portals, we have to enable the case management, we have to enable knowledge management, we have to enable all those nice features. But then we also identified okay, as part of the knowledge management, we want to make sure that we have a review of our articles, so that the clients can see can easily see the articles that are more relevant to them. So there was an element that was outside of Dynamics, and that was about the client rewording and reworking on their articles, right? So another example of why it's important to challenge, your requirements with your client is and it's again an example that happened to me a few months ago, where I was effectively working with I was actually working with IT at that time. And then IT got a list of very tricky requirements in a way, right? The requirements were around ownership of records based on, so it was an education institution, and effectively when a new student was applying to study, they had very complex rules to determine who would be the agent connecting with that student and helping them enroll in the best course, right? And depending of different kind of criteria and sometimes conflicting criteria, we found those students would be assigned to a person, right? So me, kind of with the IT director, reading through the requirements, we kind of, wow, this list, this logic is complex, right? So even to implement that in Dynamics, it seems complex, right? So I say to the IT director, I told him, but let's call him David, but David, is there a chance we can have a chat with the business? Because even, and I read through the requirements, even those two requirements here, they seem a bit tricky in a way that one conflict with the other, because I think it was, if the students come, if his country of residence is New Zealand or Australia, you assign it to person A, and then a few requirements below it says if the student is from New Zealand, it has to go to owner C. So there were some kind of conflicting rules in those requirements, right? So, and he says, yeah, Dani, we can meet with the business, but look, I had a few chats with them already before, and for them everything is clear, and so be prepared to I'm not sure we can get them again together, and be prepared, they might be a bit not so happy that we discuss those requirements again with them, right? So I say, look, try to organize a meeting, and then we'll see how we can deliver that, right? So then a few days later, he managed to slot me for, I think, an hour minimum, or even half an hour, with a few of the stakeholders. So we start the workshop, and yeah, look, they were not very happy, I think, to be there, us wasting again an hour of their time. And I start the introduction, I present myself, and I start going through the requirements, and I see some of them already starting to be annoyed and bored almost by me going through kind of a summary. And then I go through that specific requirements. I say, look, but see here, that's the challenge I have. The challenge I have is, one requirement says this, and then the other one says something conflicting, right? So I just want to understand, what's happening when. And then, to my surprise, two stakeholders start discussing the requirements, and then suddenly a third one comes in with a completely different rule to how, to how it was communicated to me on the list of requirements, right? And straight away from the beginning, I'm seeing some new requirements coming in. The ones that are that I got were completely kind of overruled by the requirement of that third person. And effectively, we spend that half an hour discussing. They spend it discussing what rules should apply when and how and this. And then effectively, we ended up parking the whole requirements implementation until they kind of internally went back, reworked between them on some of the rules, and then effectively make sure that it was clearly understood, and then went back to us with the defined and more specific rules to implement that, right? So typical example where if that you should not assume requirements are clear to everyone, and you should not just straight away jump into delivering something before really clearly understanding what the requirements mean, right? So as I said, look, challenging requirements assumptions can save your project from lots of frustration, stress, and rework down the track, right? So early enough, challenge them so that you don't end up with a big mess at the end of your project. The goal really of challenging requirements is to simplify complex requirements by proposing alternative solutions. You want to make sure to pick inconsistencies and ambiguity in requirements, and you want to help your clients effectively reevaluate priorities, because if one requirement is very important but super complex to implement, and then another one is a little bit less important but super simple to implement, I can tell you, you want to help your clients maybe reprioritize those requirements so that this, the simple one comes first, and then the other one, it's kind of, we find a better way to implement that requirement, and maybe that doesn't meet 100% of what the clients or your stakeholders exactly want, but at least it's manageable, and we can start, and down the track we can fine-tune that requirements or that feature so that it's less painful to manage or to implement. Using stories to validate requirements. So during your requirements validation session, right, what I like to do is, and I'll share with you again a story, is really spending time kind of drafting and demoing requirements using stories that relate to clients, right? So what does that mean? That means that when I do a requirements validation session, I spend the time to understand, the business of my client, and I try to articulate the demos to typical scenarios they might have. And sometimes I ask some internal help from, some allies at the company to help me create those scenarios so that I can demo them to the client. So for example, for an education institution, again, what I did is before discussing specific requirements and demoing specific requirements around a portal and how, inquiries would be managed within Dynamics 365 around the education sector. I spent time to, introduce the story I wanted to share with my client, right? So the story was about the family, right? Where you have Emma, which is the mom, and Emma is the mom of two nice little girls, Isa and Jen. And Isa and Jen are both attending the same school in Australia, and effectively Emma is the mom, and Emma will play, or actually Emma, Isa and Jen are playing a big part of the scenario of that I'm going to cover next, right? So the typical scenario, right, where I would discuss requirements and demo them to them is, for example, I say, you start with Emma. So Emma, the mom, she logs into the parent and student portal and looks for Jen's report card. So effectively, Emma got an email the last evening saying that Jen's report card is ready, so that she can effectively log into the portal and view the report card. So the report card is, a card where Jen's results from the previous semester can be analyzed, right, by the mom. All the results, how she behaves, how she what are her grades, and almost kind of attention point for each of the courses that she attend are listed in the report card. So Emma logs into the portal, and then she goes, Emma consults the knowledge articles on the portals, but she can't find the report card on the portal. So she navigates, consult the knowledge articles, but she cannot find Jen's report card somehow, right? somehow it's not there, right? She should see Jen's report card on the portal. So effectively what she does then, she start chatting with the virtual agent, right? So there is a virtual agent present on the portal, so she starts asking the virtual agent for some help, right? So then what's happening is that the virtual agent tells Emma that the report card can take up to 48 hours to be seen by the parents after the approval, right? But the chat says, look, we prefer, so you're happy, the chat suggests the creation of a case so that the school staff can investigate further, right? So Emma is on the portal and the chat can effectively automatically create a case for Emma so that someone at school can work on that inquiry. Then effectively what happens is that a case is created in Dynamics 365 and is assigned to the portal support team, right? So the case is automatically assigned, and then you can see here while you discuss these requirements, we can open Dynamics and you can discuss the phases, you can discuss specific scenarios, specific features or requirements for your case management. So this scenario really helps kind of setting the picture and setting the context on for you to discuss specific requirements with your clients. So effectively what's happening is that Tracy, the support agent, start working on the case and consult Jen's profile in Dynamics 365. So Tracy goes and consult, Jen's profile. She can see, school enrollment, class enrollment, attendance. She can see specific school enrollments to find that report card, right? And again, right, by discussing that in a nice scenario and translating that in the language of your client, which was in this case an education institution for me, I could kind of speak and relate my requirements question to that scenario. Again, easier for my client, make it easier for my client to relate to that story and provide me the information I want to extract from them so that I can configure Dynamics. So Tracy, who is our agent, what she does is she writes back an email to Emma saying that she found the report card, but that the status of the report card is still pending, right? So it's not ready. So effectively what's happening is that at the school, once the report card is finished, it goes for approval, and then someone needs to approve that report card before it's being visible for Emma. So Tracy writes back to Emma, says, look, the report is in approval state. I'm going to cancel your case. The report should be visible within 48 hours. You should be access to the report because it will be finalized, right? And then effectively at the end, you get a satisfaction survey sent for Emma so that Emma can kind of provide feedback on the support she had from the virtual agent to Tracy helping into the closure of this case. She can kind of provide, her opinion about how she got helped by the agent, by the staff and the agent. And then at the end, you of course have insight for the case resolution satisfaction. And again, you can start discussing very specific requirements here with your clients to validate, that some of the graph makes sense, some of the charts make sense. So again, that whole story just introduced a context for your clients to be able to understand what you're demoing to them and better understand the validation questions that you have for them to validate some of the requirements. So let me share with you here kind of something that marked me, right? So when you explain your idea and hit your audience with data, you can move their heads. But are you really moving their hearts, right? So stories explaining requirements, explaining demo with story, people can effectively relate to those stories, right? So your audience can see the situation in their mind, which leads to better understanding of the idea and ultimately better contribution, right? So people can relate to stories. Second, stories are memorable and repeatable. Again, maybe your stakeholders because they will remember the story. They will be able to discuss internally after they have seen them. Maybe they have to discuss this requirement with someone else, but because you frame that in a nice story, they will remember them better, and they will be able to discuss them internally and get back to you with more accurate information, right? All right, and that was the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and this presentation will be made available, I think 14 days on the YouTube channel after the presentation. So yeah, thank you again for your time, and enjoy the summit, and see you soon.